Princess Caroline of Monaco found her Prince Charming in Ernst August of Hanover in 1999. But what about Philippe Junot, the prototype playboy who walked her down the aisle 20 years earlier? Because Junot was known for spending quite a bit of time cruising for companionship at nightclubs, it's perhaps unsurprising that he met Princess Caroline out on the town. The 19-year-old princess and the 36-year-old playboy were said to have first crossed paths during the summer of 1976 at Regine's nightclub in Paris. According to royal expert J. Randy Terraborelli's book, Once Upon a Time, behind the fairy tale of Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, Junot approached Caroline first, calling her fatty. Apparently, this rather unusual greeting was not enough to warn the princess off of her suitor, and the two began to get to know each other. Before long, Junot and Caroline were an item, and things didn't take too long to get serious. In fact, things between Caroline and Junot got so serious that the princess began second-guessing her plans for the future. At the time that she started going out with Junot, Caroline was planning to study at the prestigious Princeton University. However, as she fell harder and harder for the handsome Frenchman, the princess became increasingly convinced that going to the US would be a mistake. Ultimately, Caroline decided to study at the Sorbonne in Paris to be closer to Junot. This didn't sit well with her parents, Rainier III of Monaco and Grace Kelly. According to some sources, the couple went so far as to consider placing a princely ban on the wedding. Speaking with J. Randy Terraborelli for his book, royal insider Antoinette Broccato claimed that Grace was a huge proponent of the ban. According to Broccato's interview, the idea was that Rainier would use his position as monarch to prevent Caroline from getting married in the Principality of Monaco. Grace's hope was, apparently, that this measure would help Caroline understand that marrying Junot was a bad idea. But this wasn't enough to deter her. On June 28, 1978, Princess Caroline married Junot in a civil ceremony. Just one day later, the pair wed again in a religious ceremony, per Monegasque princely tradition. And although the event was a full-blown royal affair, it also boasted a bit of a Hollywood twist. From the aristocratic side of things, blue bloods like Queen Anne of Romania and Baroness Marie-Hélène de Rothschild were in attendance. Meanwhile, other guests included Ava Gardner and her ex-husband, Frank Sinatra. While the wedding was one for the ages, so was the crash and burn that followed.
I'm intrigued.
The way that Princess Caroline remembers things, it didn't take long for her to realize that Junot was not the right man for her. As she told Jeffrey Robinson for his book Grace of Monaco, The True Story, she began to regret the wedding just days after it took place. I guess I started to wake up and wonder what I'd done while we were still on our honeymoon. Apparently, Junot invited a photographer friend of his to their getaway, promising him the exclusive right to their honeymoon shots. This behind-the-scenes deal left a sour taste in Caroline's mouth. Soon after this incident, she and Junot began to argue, and it seems that they never really stopped. One of the couple's biggest rows took place in 1980 at the Monte Carlo Grand Prix, much to the dismay of the public and Caroline's father. According to a letter obtained by J. Randy Terraborelli, Prince Rainier apparently wrote a friend, "Poor Caroline's marriage is not going well. She's been hurt. Part of this hurt could stem from the fact that the princess and the playboy were in the midst of a tabloid war." Terraborelli wrote, "Paparazzi not hired by Junot caught him in the company of others in assignations that seemed romantic. Soon after, Caroline was doing the same thing. They divorced in 1980. Afterwards, Junot returned to the playboy lifestyle and courted many women from high-profile families, which generated plenty of scandals in upper-crust circles throughout the majority of 1980s. He did eventually give matrimony another try with Danish model Nina Vedelbo Larsen, whom he married in 1987. She was just 24 years old at the time, while he was 47. Though they would go on to have 3 children together, they divorced 10 years later in 1997. These days, Junot is more than all right with avoiding the spotlight. Instead, the Frenchman has seemingly allowed his children to shine, and from what we can tell, Junot's daughter, Isabelle, is particularly ready to make her mark on society. On April 2nd, 2022, the gorgeous young brunette walked down the aisle with one of Europe's most eligible young men, Alvaro Falco, 4th Marquis of Cuba. The wedding was considered one of the biggest society events of the year, attracting many high-profile guests. Beyond all the pomp, though, the most important part of the wedding was the emotional element. As the father of the bride revealed in an interview with Hola, he cried during the ceremony. He said, "Well, it seems to me that must happen to many parents, right? It's very exciting."